सवेरों का मेरे तू सूरज लागे, तू मेरा कोई ना होके भी कुछ लागे.
Jungkook stood at the doorway of the hospital room, staring at his father laying on the bed. Face was pale, weakened from his condition, but there was still a familiar sharpness in his eyes. He hadn't spoken much since arrived, but his mother's condition wasn't good either, so he told Isha to bring her back home, as it's already getting late. Her mother was very angry on him for disappearing like this without letting anyone know about his whereabouts. But he never expected that his father would be one of them as well. Doctor told him earlier that taking too much stress has put a pressure on his heart and he needed to be taken care of. This is second time it happens and couldn't risk for the third. The weight of everything, his family, wine, his mistakes, was pressing down on him. But for now, his attention was focused on the person who he hated the most. His father was stable for now, but the thought of losing him despite all the anger and resentment made his chest tighten. Jungkook, he spoke, his voice hoarse but firm as he blinked several times to look at the person standing at the entrance. I didn't expect you would come. Jungkook clenched his jaw, stepping inside the room, closing the door behind, maintaining his distance. I came because of Mom and Isha. They were worried about you, he replied quietly. Jungkook's heart felt heavy, torn between worry and resentment. Mr. Jeon's gaze lingered on his son for a moment before he looked away. I know you hate me, son, he began surprising Jungkook. You thought I don't care about you, that I pushed you too hard, but in reality I care too much than I should have been. Jungkook's eyes hardened, but he didn't speak. His father had always been cold, focused on shaping him into someone who could carry on the family's responsibility, never showing any softness. I wasn't always a good father, I know, he admitted, his voice low. I wanted you to be successful, to be someone the world respected. He took a pause before continuing his next words. Carefully, when that incident happened at your school, when the girl accused you, I let my anger control me. I never expected you to do such things. It made me feel like I failed in raising you. My years of struggle to build a family reputation, that I didn't saw that what it was doing to you. Jungkook's breath hissed, slightly surprised by the admission, but soon it turned into anger. That because you choose to believe them over your own son. He knew he shouldn't be this harsh considering the situation of him, but he had never expected to hear these words from his father. For years, that incident had been the wedge between them, driving him to rebel, to act out, to fight against the man who had never believed him and always saw him just as a failure. I should have trusted you, he continued, his eyes darkening with regret. But by the time I realized how much damage I had done, it was too late. You had already shut me out, rebelling over my each decisions, and I let my pride keep pushing you away. I saw you as disobedient kid, whom I failed. Didn't realize I was the one reason behind it. Jungkook remained silent, the walls he had built up over the years trembling. His father's words were like cracks in the foundation of the resentment he had held onto for so long. I wasn't trying to ignore you, Jungkook, the voice softer now. I just don't wanted you to struggle the way I did, pressuring you to become better than me, but I failed to see you were suffering with all that pressure I had put on you. I failed to protect you when all you needed me the most. Myane. His voice choked up. Jungkook swallowed hard, feeling a knot tighten in his chest. His father's apology, as unexpected as it was, didn't erase the years of hurt, but it did stir something inside him. He had always wanted his father's approval, his understanding, but had given up on it a long time ago. You wanted me to make Strong person? He asked, his voice strained. But never thought if I could be able to live up to your expectations. Mr. John closed his eyes for a moment, as if the words stung. I realized it late, son. After seeing the person you had become because of me, I hated myself even more. Did he actually mean what he said? Did he realize how much I used to rely on him, seeing him as my role model? But it all broke down one day, and now it's hard to believe. I can understand your anger, Jungkook. After all, you had inherited it from me, he said, a sad smile hiding many pins tugged at his lips. I was also rebellious kid like you at your age, even much younger when I ran out of my hometown. Jungkook listened carefully. This is first time he found his father looked vulnerable, telling his side in front of him. I was 16 when I ran from my house in the search of work because I don't have father to look after me, and my mother used to stay very ill after he left us alone. To survive, we always have to spread hands in front of my uncle. The only option I had to become independent as soon as I can to look after my mother properly. So I ran away. Mr. Jian looks ahead in deep thinking, as if reminiscing about the painful past he never shared to anyone except his wife. He won't even let his kids know how much he had suffered, just so he could provide a better future to them. They deserve his blessings, not his sufferings. I ran and raced a big city like Seoul. We used to only eat 2 times a day to save money with the one elder brother I know from my hometown who ran away with me. I wanted money and I wanted to earn it as quickly as I can, so my mother do not have to rely on anyone. But my fate doesn't allow to me because the moment I become capable of to buy anything, I want my mother. She also left me. There were unshed tears in his eyes, as he still refused to let him slide, but Jungkook was shocked to see his father like this, a reality he hides from everyone. She left me before I could able to show how successful I got. He took a deep breath, shutting his eyes. I just wanted to buy a moment of happiness to her in this world, but I guess God didn't wanted it. But since that moment I realized how important money is, because if I had it that time I could have saved her. I survived here all alone until I met your mother, and we fell in love, then we had you. Smiling a little this time. First time holding you in my arms, I only wanted you to give everything I couldn't have, and blessed that I won't let my kids suffer. But I don't know how as the time passes and everything started to fade, I become like this. I never wanted to hurt you, but yes, I should have trusted you. I did wrong. Mr. Jeon said, breathing hard, feeling the pain in his chest rise again, and Jungkook immediately by his side asked if he is alright and was going to call doctor, but his father stopped him saying that he is alright, and Jungkook didn't let go his hand, feeling tears threatening to fall out from his eyes. There was a long silence between them. The years of anger and bitterness weren't something that could be fixed overnight. Jungkook knew that, but hearing his father's remorse, seeing the cracks in the stern facade made it harder for him to hold on to his resentment. Because he knew no one is perfect and human makes mistakes. What mattered is realization of the wrong they did and remorse. I know it's not easy to forgive someone, he said calmly, but I hope that you'll come back, Jungkook. He added, his voice faltering. Not for me, but for your mother and Isha. They are suffering even if they don't say it. No one is happy at home, and it's all because of me. Jungkook's face tightened, the weight of his father's words sinking in. His mother's tear, Isha's quiet sadness, it had all been there, but he had been too consumed by his own anger to see it. Come back, he added, his voice softer now. Not for me, but for them. Jungkook met his father's gaze, searching for any sign of deception, but there was none. The man in front of him wasn't the cold, unyielding figure he had fought against for so many years. He was just a father asking for a second chance. Jungkook said nothing more. He gave a small reluctant nod, then turned towards the door. As he walked out in the hallway, he felt Jimin's hand on his shoulder, offering a silent support. Jungkook did not look back, but for the first time in years, he didn't feel the same crushing anger toward his father. Jungkook did come back home after his father's apologies, and the things still weren't good between them, but it wasn't tense like before, as Jungkook could see the effort his father was putting to amend the things, and he was glad for it. But that wasn't the source of his tension. His concern was Ryan, who was avoiding him like a plague, and he knew that he was the reason behind it, and he needed to apologize to her for being so harsh with his words. His chest tightened with regret. He let his anger control him, lashing out at the one person who had always cared for him, even when he didn't deserve it. Ryan's word had cut deeper than any slap, deeper than any punch he ever taken. He was still nothing like his father because his father has guts to ask for forgiveness, but Jungkook himself couldn't able to pluck up the courage to apologize to Ryan, and her ignoring him made it even worse. His jaw clenched at the thought. He hated his father for many things: his control, his coldness, the way he ignored him. But now in the moment, Jungkook realized he had done the same thing to Ryan. But she was being too persistent. Even he told her many times to stay away from him. Ryan had tried to break those walls he tried hard to build around himself, so no one can hurt him again. She was threatened his emotion, which made him vulnerable. He hates being vulnerable. Why did she come so close to him when all he tried to push her away? It took him years to become this strong and guarded to control his emotion, yet when he is in front of her, he is helpless and loses control easily. He remembered the first time he met her 3 years ago. Jungkook came back from his morning jog, noticed a few trucks parked outside the house next door. New neighbors, he figured. As he approached his front door, he heard a soft voice behind him. Turning around, he saw a girl in floral dress, her back to him, directing workers as they carried boxes inside. She seemed young, too young to be handling all this alone, and when the workers left the heavier boxes, she tried to lift a smaller one herself, but it was clear she was struggling. Just as the box slipped from her grasp, Jungkook quickly stepped in, catching it before it can hit the ground. Their eyes met for a brief second, and those innocent eyes widening, looking back at him with surprise. Jungkook felt a strong tug at his heart, and the girl's cheeks flushed with embarrassment when he carried the box instead. "Thank you," she whispered, clearly flustered. She tried to reach for the box again, but Jungkook, seeing her struggle, offered to help. He carried the box inside, setting it down on the living room table as she had instructed. She smiled shyly, thanking him again. "Thank you so much, Mister Jungkook," he calls him, breaking his train of thought as Jungkook was in daze, thinking about the first time he met Ryan. Are you still thinking about her? What's her name, Ryan? Jungkook sat at his desk in quiet office, gulping a pill, running a hand through his hair as frustration, regret weighed on him. He couldn't shake the guilt from the night at the club. He had been so lost in his anger after the argument with his father that he hadn't seen Ryan's intention. She hadn't deserved his outburst at all. She had only shown up to tell him about his dad's condition, something he had been completely unaware of. He looked up at Jimin, needing answers. "How did Ryan even find me at that club that night?" he asked, his voice carrying a note of remorse. Jimin, noticing the tension in Jungkook's tone, hesitated. She called me," he finally admitted. "She asked me where you were. At first I didn't want to tell her, but when she mentioned your dad's condition, I had no choice. She was so worried, and you weren't picking up my calls also." Jungkook sighed deeply, the weight of it sinking in. "I shouldn't have shouted at her that night," he muttered, his voice filled with the remorse. "She didn't deserve that, not when she was just trying to help. I was angry at myself, but I took it out on her. I don't have any right to disrespect her like this." Jimin looked at him sympathetically but didn't hold back. Yeah, that was pretty harsh, I'm not gonna lie, and she didn't do anything wrong, she just wanted you to know about your dad. But then again, you also didn't expected her to show up suddenly. Also, you quickly drew a conclusion that she wanted to force you to talk with your family. Jungkook rubbed his face with his hand, feeling the guilt intensify. He knew he was at fault. I know, I was so wrapped up in my own frustration that I couldn't see how shaken up she was that night. But I mistook all over thinking she was being like other days. Jungkook thought that she was invading his personal space, a sanctuary he created to protect himself, to give time to understand what's happening around him. And that night he was at his lowest, intoxicated, not wanted anyone around him, not even his friend Jimin. That's why he had switched off his phone as well. Just with the stranger where no one knows him. Her presence took him by surprise as he didn't expected her arrival at all, much like to a place where she almost got the anger on his father, the anger on the society, the anger on why she always triggers his emotions. Adding on why sacrificing her safety being careless, he wasn't aware of his father's condition, so it all made him thought that she wanted him to return home while he wasn't ready to face anyone, forcing him for someone which was a very sensitive part of his life and he needed time to clear his thoughts. That's why he had left his home. It also felt like invasion to him for Ryan to witness his vulnerable side, knowing how much she likes him, but when she realized that he is nothing, just a broken weak person who doesn't deserve her at all, would she also started to hate him after finding about his truth? Would she believe him, or she'll be like his father and started to distance herself after knowing his secret? It's better to push her now than getting attached at a deeper level and separating. Ryan deserves someone better than him and not the mess he is now, who doesn't even have any control over his mind, thoughts and action, who's living his life recklessly because he doesn't care about himself anymore even if he dies. No one knows what's happened to him during that 1 year period at detention center. He realizes the world could be an ugly place. Those anti-depression pills could only control his thoughts for a meantime, but he knows his dark reality resides inside his brain. Not even Jimin is much aware about it. Pushing her away wasn't his arrogance, but his need. That's why he always maintained a distance between them despite knowing about her crush on him. He isn't fool, he can see in her eyes clearly. But that's what his biggest fear. He just hopes it's disappear if he won't give in to her. Jimin looks at his friend, defeated form. He had never seen Jungkook this bothered, much like losing his mind for anyone before. Is she and you? Don't tell me there's something going on between you two. Even he could guess it by looking at Jungkook's face. He still asked, on you, there's nothing between us. She's Isha's friend, right? So you consider her as a sister too? What are you saying? He exclaimed. I don't consider her as my sister. Isha is enough. He denied immediately. I know what you are thinking, Jimin, but you yourself know that how much I despise being in a relationship. So her and me, there's nothing. There never will be. Even he himself wasn't sure of the last sentence he let out. But there's something Jimin could see which Jungkook is aware of, yet not wanted to give in to that feeling. Jimin just don't want his friend to get hurt again. He already suffering enough. Days passed and Ryan didn't come by Jeon's house anymore, limited her presence there, keeping her promise to not show her face. But he catch glimpses of her sometimes, smiling and talking with others, as the thing happened between them never affected her at all, where he was dying every day with the weight of not apologizing to her. She never looked his way. He missed her presence more than he wanted to admit. There was an emptiness now, one he hadn't noticed before. She was being normal with everyone except him, but didn't he himself wanted it? For Ryan to finally leave him alone, but why now her distance bothers him? Because he know that he didn't wanted it to happen like this way. Where she'll get hurt by him disrespecting her. He had to at least apologize to her, but how when she won't even give him a chance to explain himself and avoiding him each and every time he approaches? Is this how she felt before when he used to stay cold towards her? Then he accept her behavior because he deserved every bit of it. It's just the reason for avoiding each other is same. Her avoiding Jungkook to protect herself, him avoiding Wyan to protect her from him. Jungkook hesitated on the doorstep, his hand hovering before he finally knocked, his heart heavy with guilt. He wasn't used to feeling this vulnerable, remorseful, and desperate to make things right. But Wyan's absence had become an ache he couldn't ignore, one he knew that he caused it. The door slowly opened, revealing Wyan's grandmother, Halmoni. She looked at him with a mix of surprise and curiosity, her eyes gentle but knowing. Jungkook, it's been more some time I have seen you around here. Is there a reason for your visit? Jungkook cleared his throat, suddenly feeling like a little boy caught in something he couldn't fully explain. Yes, Halmoni, I wanted to talk to Wyan. Halmoni's eyes softened with understanding and she let out a quiet sigh as she placed her duster down. I see, she turned, motioning him inside. She's not home right now, she said, glancing at him thoughtfully. But I think I understand why you're here. Mine's been different these days, quieter even though. She tried to hide it with smiles. I know her well, Jungkook. I raised her, and I can feel when her heart is troubled. Jungkook nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. It's my fault. I said things I shouldn't have. Things I didn't mean, he admitted, his voice low. Halmoni watched him carefully, her expression both kind and perceptive. As though she could see the turmoil churning within him, she studied him quietly before speaking, her voice tinged with a gentle sadness. Jungkook, Van has always been the one to give love freely, even though she never truly received it herself. Her words hung in the air, heavy with the meaning. Her parents were not there for her the way they should have been. She grew up without that steady foundation, without the kind of love a child needs. Jungkook's chest tightened as he absorbed her words, picturing Wyan's quiet strength. He thought of her gentle smiles, her warm gestures, and the small ways she shown her care of him despite his coldness. Yet she still chose to give love. She continued, her voice steady but with a note of pride. She has this light, this openness. She spread kindness because it's who she is. But when someone she cares about deeply disappoints her, it wounds her more than you might even imagine. If she's upset with you, it's because her heart has been truly hurt. Jungkook looked down, shame flooding him as he realized the full weight of what he had done. Wyan had only ever shown him care, had wanted to understand his pain, and he'd thrown her kindness back at her, pushing her away with harsh, thoughtless words, his hands clenched at his side. I don't know how to make her believe. I'm sorry, Halmoni. She deserves more than an apology, but I don't know how. Halmoni's gaze softened and a small smile touched her lips. An apology, Jungkook, is only words unless it comes from the heart. If Wyan was hurt so deeply, it may take more than that for her to believe you. He met her eyes, uncertain but determined. I just can't stand seeing her this way. Knowing I am the reason behind of her sadness, I want to take away the pain she is in because of me. She nodded slowly, her gaze distant as if recalling her own memories of pain and forgiveness. Then you must be true to yourself. If you believe showing her the truth of your heart will ease her sadness, don't hold back. Wyan is strong, but she carries her wounds deeply. She doesn't need empty gestures, Jungkook. She needs sincerity. Show her what you truly feel. Jungkook's expression softened, a flicker of understanding taking root. He wasn't used to this laying his emotion bare, but for her, he knew he had to try. I understand, Halmoni. Thank you. Halmoni gave him a small nod, the faintest trace of the smile on her lips. She glanced at a heavy box resting by the door. Would you mind carrying these boxes upstairs? It's too heavy for me to lift. He nodded and without hesitation carefully lifted the box, carrying it up to the stairs. Jungkook carried the last heavy box up the stair, adjusting his grip as he stepped quietly into Wan's room. He wasn't exactly sure why Halmoni had asked him to bring it here, but the moment he entered, he could tell this was her space. The room was filled with light, colors, and warmth, a stark contrast of his own, which felt dull and closed off. Everything here was so neat and carefully placed, a reflection of Wan's gentle thought of nature. He set the box down near her desk, but as he turned, he knocked a few books off the edge. Cursing under his breath, he knelt to gather them, pausing when he heard a tiny rustling sound nearby. Looking up, he saw a small turtle in a container on her desk, its head peeking out to look at the stranger's presence in room. Jungkook looked at him with curiosity. Had met him before once Wan had brought it to the Jeon's house. As he picked up the books, his hand brushed against a photograph that had fallen to the floor. Turning it over, he saw a picture of Wan as a small child, maybe 4 years old. Her round cheeks and bright eyes filled with a joy that felt both innocent and enduring. He couldn't help but smile, seeing how adorable and carefree she looked. But that smile quickly faded, remembering what Halmoni had said about Wan's difficult childhood. His heart ached. She grown up without the warmth or support of her parents, yet somehow she had become someone who radiated kindness. She's strong, he murmured to himself, admiration laced with regret. I could never. He was about to tuck the photo back in one of the notebooks. He froze, his eyes caught something. No, one of the open pages, his own name written in her handwriting. His heart skipped a beat, and he hesitated, feeling the tug of curiosity mixed with the discomfort of knowing he was intruding on something private. He knew he should close the notebook, leaving things untouched, but the sight of his name there so unexpected sparked a need to understand why she had written about him. He took a steadying breath, his fingers hovering over the page. Conflicted, he tried to close the notebook, but his fingers lingered. The desire to have a glimpse of something of her thoughts, of what she felt or believed about him was higher. As he hesitated, his eyes drifted down to catching a glimpse of some written words. Jungkook drew in a breath, his curiosity slipping past any restraint he tried to hold on to. Jungkook chuckled a little, imagining her frustration. As he read more, though her words softened, showing a concern he hadn't anticipated. Jungkook paused reading. So she knew about his truth already? He wonders, even after knowing about him, why actually trust him rather than accusing him like others. She had always been there, observing, caring, accepting even his flaws, and then he read the words that stopped him cold. His heart raced, pounding in his chest as he reread the line. This wasn't some fleeting crush. Her feelings ran deep, far deeper than he had ever allowed himself to believe. Just as he was absorbing it, he heard her voice from the doorway. "Did you read everything you wanted to know, Mr. Jungkook?" His head shot up as he turned to see Van standing there, her face carefully neutral but her eyes holding a cold distance. Now Mr. Jungkook sounds like an insult to him. She cares her arms, her expression hurt yet composed. "Are you satisfied after learning how foolish and desperate girl I am? Just trying to get your attention?" Jungkook shook his head, words catching in his throat. "When I don't think of," she cut him off, her voice sharp but restrained. "Cut the crap, Jungkook. You didn't want it to see my face, so what are you doing now here?" He had taken a step closer, desperate to explain, but she took one back, her guard unmistakable. "When I came here to talk to you about what happened that night," he said softly. But she looked away, her voice aced with bitterness. "There's nothing to talk about. You made it clear the last time we spoke." She started to turn away, the dismissal in her tone breaking something in him. "No, Ryan, I didn't mean those words," he insisted, his voice cracking with urgency. "I was drunk and angry. I wasn't thinking clearly. Please believe me, Drunk words are sober thoughts, Jungkook, she replied, her voice trembling but resolute. "You always avoided me, always kept your distance, and I was just so foolish. Should have understood your actions. I was at fault too to approach you when you made it clear you don't like me being around you." She shook her head as if clearing away the last traces of her old hope. "And I get it now. I won't do that anymore." Jungkook shook his head. Him avoiding Wine wasn't she make it out to be. The look on her face buzzed him, each word laced with the pain he had caused her. He wanted to reach out to take away the hurt he inflicted, but she stepped further back, drawing a clear line he felt helpless to cross. "Wine," he whispered, hating the way her name sounded wrapped in sorrow. "Please, I never wanted to hurt you." She looked down, her voice soft but unyielding. "Then respectfully spare me any more humiliation and just leave." Jungkook stood there staring at her for a long moment, swallowing against the painful lump in his throat. He wanted to stay, to fight for the forgiveness he didn't deserve but desperately wanted. Yet he could see the wall she had built around her heart, and he knew he'd be wrong to tear it down too soon. Finally he turned and walked out, his vision blurring with the unshed tears. He thought he understood the pain, but the pain was much worse he had ever imagined. Vine picked up her diary, closing it gently and placing it back on the desk, her fingers lingering on the cover for a moment. She felt exhausted, the weight of the past few days pulling her down, while Jungkook's words echoed over and over in her mind, sharper each time she recalled them. Her chest tightened at the memory. She never thought he'd feel that way. She knew Jungkook was capable of handling himself. She only wanted him to know that he didn't have to carry everything alone, that he was allowed to be cared for, to be loved, but he hadn't seen it that way. The words felt like they had been carved into her, making her question everything she had done for him. She hadn't been trying to control him. She wasn't desperate for his attention or validation just because she has tried to show her kind gesture. He made it look like she was the same obsessed girl. She thought he could sense her sincerity, that he understand, but he turned it around, making her feel small, putting in same category of the girl from his school who just wanted his attention desperately, just because she has also developed feelings for him. That night she only gone to find him because his family needed him. Isha had called her in tears, unable to reach out her brother, terrified because Mr. Jeon was in hospital after a heart attack. She knows Isha couldn't handle everything alone as Mrs. Jeon was barely holding herself together, and Wyan knew they needed Jungkook by their side. When Isha gave her Jimin's number, she didn't think twice. She called, found out where he was, and went there to bring him back. She hadn't been prepared for the scene at the club. When she finally found him, Jungkook was drinking himself into oblivion, lost in a haze of anger and pain. The hurt in his eyes had shaken her, but she pushed her through, knowing how important it was that he come home. But he hadn't given her a chance to explain. Before she could even speak, he lashed out, throwing her kindness back at her like it was something shameful. Ryan's hand clenched around the edge of her desk, her heart aching at the memory. She gone there because she cared, not to control him, not to cross boundaries, but because his family was her family too. Isha was her best friend, and Mrs. Jeon had always treated her with warmth, just like a mother would. Mr. Jeon had checked in on her countless times, giving her the fatherly concern she had never received from her own father, and in one night with the cruel words, Jungkook had made her feel like none of it mattered, like she was nothing but an outsider. Would he have reacted the same way if Isha went there and not her? She wondered bitterly. Her eyes stung as she swallowed down the hurt. She only wanted to help him, and for what? To be humiliated, to be reminded that no matter how much the love Jeon showed her, she didn't truly belong to them. Truthfully, sank in painfully, Jungkook had made her feel like she was nothing, like the only family she really had was her grandmother. Hearing those words from him, knowing how she felt about him, had left a wound that wouldn't heal easily. She never asked him to return her feelings. She knew he carried his own scars and kept his walls high. That's why she never even tried to confess, as she was content being loving him from afar. She had never wanted to be the one to add to his burdens, but the damage was done, and she knew his harsh words would be there like a scar every time she saw him. She had tried to touch the fire, then how didn't she expected herself to get burned? She took a shaky breath, blinking back the tears that threatened to spill. She was done letting him make her feel this way. Jungkook's word may have hurt her deeply, but she wouldn't let him hurt her more. She would protect herself from now on. Whatever kindness she had shown to him would stay locked away, because she knew now that he never understood. She should have listened to Isha when she told her to stay away from her brother, so she wouldn't have to face this. The reminder was sharp, constant, and unchanging, and no matter how much it hurt, she had to accept it. Ryan glanced over at her pet baby turtle, hearing few noises, his small eyes peering back at her from the container on her desk. She let out a soft sigh and whispered, "Am I doing right, Toki?" The little turtle stretched his neck towards her as if trying to reach out, and let out a faint, curious noise. Smiling through her tears, she lifted him gently into her hand, cradling him close. "At least I know you and Grandma will always be with me," she murmured, her voice soft. "You are my real family." Toki nestled down, ducking his tiny head as though he sensed the sadness in her. She brushed a finger over his shell, her smile growing despite the ache in her heart. "You are the best listener, Toki."